Meeting is now streaming live. Okay, you can raise. Okay, it says that we're live, but I am not seeing it in the group. So I'm hoping that let's see, copy streaming link. I don't know what I'm doing here. Let's see.
Okay.
Okay, well, we'll just keep talking.
We'll figure it out. Yeah,
yeah.
it's okay.
Okay. I think I need to go into, I don't know what I need to go into.
Do you want me to go into the group on my phone and see if it's?
Yeah.
Okay.
That would be great. For all those who are watching this later, they'll watch us fumble through this.
It's live. It looks like it's live in your group.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay. I think all of that was live.
Yes. You're welcome, everyone, for making a fool of ourselves, making you feel better about yourself. Awesome. So today, Erin is joining us, and thank you so much, Erin, for agreeing to do this. I'm so excited for you to share the wealth of experience and knowledge that you have, not only as a therapist, but as a mother. So maybe you can share with our friends who are watching us be silly here on camera. Can you tell us who Erin Jakowski is and how you got started in what you're doing, especially what led you to what you're going to share with us today?
Absolutely. So, hi, my name is Erin Jakowski. And first, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to give some insight to your group members and help as much as I can. So I'm a mom of 3. So I have an 11-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 5-year-old. And then I've been a pediatric occupational therapist for 15 years.
Wow.
And yeah, it's been a while now. And occupational therapy is not always like, what is that? And with kids, it's really it helps to address really anything that a child needs to have a successful day and be able to participate in everything they need to during a day.
I love that. Because my youngest son has Down syndrome. So he has an occupational therapist that has helped us with him holding forks and holding pencils to poking Play-Doh and strengthening his dexterity. Like it just comes in all sorts of different forms, I'm learning. So
right. Yeah.
That's awesome.
It's very broad. And where I've really found my passion and specialized is with behavior and childhood behavior and what that is and what that means and how to help. And I started taking lots of classes and reading lots of books about sort of this new movement with behavior about not just those cognitive pieces of it, but what's coming from the brain, what's coming from the body, and the psychology of it, and the child development of it. And it's just really fascinating and really exciting. And I started taking what I was learning and what the research was showing is how our bodies and brains work, and applying it at my clinic and with the families that I was working with, and applying it at home with my own 3 kids. And it was just pretty astounding, the results, just going about behavior differently than we have in the past, now that there's all this new research on the brain and body connection.
Do you have some results you can share with us, like how it's helped your kids or any patients that you've worked with? Like what difference did you see in your clinics?
Yeah, so the difference is, and we'll get a lot more into this when I talk about it's a pretty simple step-by-step process to think through and go through. But the real key is understanding that behavior is communication. And it's communicating that, hey, I don't have the skills I need in this moment to do what you're asking me to do. And when you think about behavior like that, and it just really helps you meet your child where they're at and help them from there. And that's where behavior really, really changes. It's when a child feels understood, feels heard, feels seen. That's when behavior can change a lot better than when they feel judged or shamed or bad or guilty and or helpless kind of, or controlled, or in one of those places. So it's just helping the child get to that space where not only their behavior changes because they want it to, but also cultivating and improving a relationship based off connection versus kind of older ways, which were more based off of fear. So yeah.
I love that. And I see this so much in my own children, especially because I have my third child. She is a little spitfire, just, and her emotions. And I was thinking about this as you were talking, like that. I was scrambling to take notes, but it's so true, because we all, even as adults, we make decisions based on emotion. So it would only make sense that our kids would do the same. And my daughter, who's the Spitfire, sometimes she just doesn't know how she's feeling. And when she lashes out, we're like, okay, what's really going on here? Like, what do we really got to dive into? What's the underlying feeling? Are you scared? Are you tired? There's so many things that she could be feeling that's actually causing her to act out in a way that we're like, that's not typically how you would respond in a situation.
Right.
So.
And it's so helpful too when we it all snowballs too, because when you think about behavior that way, then you stop taking it personally, like this attack, like it's on purpose. They're so disrespectful. I'm going to raise this human being that doesn't know how to respect others. And when we take that behavior personally, we almost show up in a space of sort of judgment and resentment without even knowing it, versus a place of, oh, I want to help you. So it's a lot easier to stay calm and in a helpful mode when you're thinking, okay, this isn't about me. This is about my child needing help in this moment. And that's my job, is to help them. So
that's
be on the same team versus opposing team.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's so awesome. So you mentioned you have a strategy or a system to take people through. So you mentioned earlier that it's a 6-step system. Can you walk us through those 6 steps?
Sure. Yeah, for sure. So it's called the Behavior Breakthrough System. And really, it's taken just a lot of information and knowledge and practice to kind of figure out, like, okay, what's a way? Because I'm a pretty black and white person, like I like the the step by step, and
check
it off, like this, then this, then this, like this framework to go through. And my brain works, and the behavior is so gray, and so it's just taken trial and error to kind of like, okay, how do I what's a way to package all of this into something that's simple and actionable and easy to implement. So
okay, I hope everyone has a pen and pencil, because this this sounds like gold.
Yeah. So I call it the Behavior Breakthrough System, and like there's 6 steps, there's 6 C's, and it definitely goes in order. So sort of an overview. So the first step is, and this is important and where a lot of people get overwhelmed, is to choose one specific behavior that you want to start with. And this is so that you can be consistent, right? And also you can be consistent and not get overwhelmed. So it's too hard to think of all the behaviors you see all the time and try to fix all of them at the same time. Like it's too overwhelming for you, it's too overwhelming for your child, and it just doesn't work. So the first step is just to choose one, and choose one that's specific. So you're not going to want to choose like, I want my child to stop being disrespectful, right? That's too broad, right? Okay. You want to start with something you can put your finger on. So my child has difficulty turning off the video games when I ask him to stop. Like something that you can put a finger on to start. And then you can start developing a plan about that specific behavior. And then once you have that specific behavior sort of nailed down, you can move on to the next one, but you'll watch how it snowballs, right? So you choose your behavior, and then the next step is clarity. And we touched on this before, and it's to get real clear just about what behavior means. So, and this part is sort of setting your mindset up so you're in a space to help them later. So it's that behavior is communication, and the fact that my child can't meet this expectation means that there's a skill that's lacking. Another phrase I like to use is, if he could, he would. If he's not doing it, he actually can't. And behavior is not a choice. It's not intentional. It's not purposeful. It's not meant to ruin your day. It's not, it's just not on purpose. And so getting real clear about just what behavior means shifts your lens to being helpful versus helpless, kind of. So that's the second step, is just understand that's what behavior means.
Okay, so I love this one because it really opens my eyes to, for example, I have my second son. I know he has, it never been tested for it, but some ADD issues. And because of those, and it may be ADHD, because he gets so hyper focused on computer and video and whatever he's doing, that no matter what we ask him to do, he reverts right back to that as soon as he's done whatever we ask him to do. Mm-hmm. So like this, getting clear on the behavior that he's doing, and choosing, like, we can choose to act on our emotions or not, but they're obviously growing and learning to even understand what those are from the very beginning. So until they really understand how it is, like you said, they can't make the choice to act or not act on those. That takes some serious willpower for an adult. Like,
it does. It takes serious willpower. And on that point is, so impulse control and emotional regulation and sustained attention, all of those are executive functioning skills. And they're up here. They're in that frontal part of our brain. And those skills start developing at about 3.5 or 4 and continue into our low 20s. So, and then they're fully mature. So yeah, so it's so these kids their brain's not even capable of some of this impulse control and emotional regulation. And we expect it, but it's not possible. I mean, there's ways to help them and transition them, but it's another way to think about this, and just not a choice. They're not doing this on purpose. Their brain is just not there yet because of their age.
Yeah. Wow. And I think of this even with our teenagers, how much we expect of them. And yet, if you're saying that it's not fully developed until they're 20, like, how much pressure are we putting on these teenagers to be adults when they can barely regulate their emotions as it is?
Right.
That's crazy.
Exactly. And especially now with everything that's going on, it's just another layer of that.
Yeah. Okay. So take us to the next step where hopefully we can, I don't know, what's the next step where we can kind of guide them down the path? Yeah.
We're guiding down the path. So and the clarity here is just what behavior is. We're not, it's not yet what this behavior in this moment means. We get to that later, but the clarity is just like, what does behavior mean? So we're setting our mindset up to be able to help. Then the next step is control. And this control has to do with controlling your own triggers. So it's so important to be able to control those. And there are basically, I found 3 types of triggers. So there's triggers that come kind of from your child, triggers that come from yourself, and then what I call like conditional triggers. So a trigger from your child might be kind of the examples I was giving before, like he's so disrespectful, he's lazy, He won't ever do anything to help. Like when your child says something like that to you and it triggers you, getting control of that, which the clarity piece can help. And then the self triggers are those triggers where you start to think, and these are all thoughts. I'll go into that in a minute, but I'm a bad mom. I guess I'm just a mom that yells, kind of those
We
types of
start to
thoughts.
label ourselves and
We
our
start,
kids.
right, right. And it
Wow.
doesn't help that you have people in public or your mother-in-law or whoever, like, or your mom, like telling you all these things about what you're doing right and doing wrong. So you start to label yourself, because really
Wow.
what a trigger is, like, we always think of a trigger as, my child yelled at me, my child yelling at me triggered me. Okay, so that's kind of how our process goes. But there's a missing step in there. So it's not your child's yelling at you that triggered you. It's the thought you had about your child yelling that triggered you. So it's your thought was, oh, he's so disrespectful, so now I'm triggered. Versus if you're thinking, oh my gosh, he just needs help, you're not going to be triggered.
I
So
love that.
yeah, really coming down to what's actually triggering you is not the event. Because kids can't control how we think or feel.
Exactly.
Like it's all our thoughts. It's all our
Yes. And I have been saying this so long to my own kids that I think they could repeat it in their sleep. But you need to be in charge of your own feelings. Nobody makes you feel any certain way. You're the one who decides that. So this one right here might set some people off. Does it set some of your clients off when you're like, look, you actually control yourself, not your child? Because that's the difference in this step that you're talking about, is controlling yourself and not another person. So how do you go about explaining that?
Oh, it's hard, because it can be really eye-opening, because really, when it really comes down to it, you can't control another person on the planet. You really can't. Maybe with fear. You can probably control people with fear, but that's not a path anybody here wants to go down. So really controlling yourself. And that's what's interesting. I think what people, and I know I'm diverting a little bit, but I've had a lot of clients that have come in, and I even, initially was doing this with my kids, but it's like, fix my kid. I need to fix my kid. Teach my kids some self-regulation strategies so they can calm themselves down. Like, my kid's having trouble with this, right? But they're kids. And so, and what I was really finding is the best way to help with behavior, I don't even really need the kid. I just need the parent, because the parent is going to lead the kid into the better behavior. It's the only way to do it, because self-regulation, when it comes really down to it, cannot be taught. It can only be experienced. And as you experience self-regulation, that's how it builds in your brain and your body. So teaching it just doesn't work.
That's awesome. So then communication, like telling somebody to do something, isn't going to work. You have to model it. You have to show them how to do it.
Yeah, and guide them and sort of lead them into being able to do it, because we've all been there. Like, okay, deep breaths are great to calm yourself down, and there's all these beautiful strategies, and they are. But I bet 95% of the time, when your kid is in a meltdown and you tell them to take some deep breaths, that's not helpful, because they don't. And there's a whole nother reason with the brain and the body. I don't even know if we'll get to that piece of it today, but of why doesn't that work in that moment?
Oh, so that's what I was going to ask. And maybe we'll have to do a second training, but
we can do it. We can do it. Yeah, we can still do it.
Yeah. Is this going off on a tangent, or
a little bit, but it's okay. But we'll get to it actually the next step.
Okay.
We can cover it in the next one.
Okay.
So one more piece of controlling your triggers. So there's the triggers of your thoughts about your kids. There's the triggers that are actually a result of the thoughts about yourself. And then there's the conditional triggers, which are like, for instance, one of my huge triggers is when I'm running late. So if I'm running late and something happens, I go off like that. right? But if I'd had more time, I wouldn't have.
Mm-hmm.
So there's those triggers that are just like you're multitasking, you have too much to do, those types of things can also, those aren't really thought-based triggers, but they're more condition-based triggers. So that's 3. So far it's been choose the behavior you want to start with, be clear on what behavior actually means, and then control your triggers. Really check into your thoughts, change your thoughts to control your triggers. That's what it comes down to, is changing those thoughts.
Before we move on to the next step, can I ask you do you teach parents some, like, what's one thing that we can share with our parents today that would help you teach other parents to control their emotions, or learn at least to become more aware of them?
Yeah, so the first, and again, it's based off of, you go back to this one behavior that you've chosen, right? So the example I started with was, my kid I'd say, hey, it's time to be done playing video games, and they yell, no, I hate you, or whatever. And then you, as a parent, get triggered, and now you're yelling back at them, right? So that's the triggering thing. And so the one thing that parents can do is that one behavior that they've chosen, the next time that happens, no, I hate you, go away, is to just stop a minute, just pause, because most behaviors do not need a immediate reaction. We think they do, but really it's okay to just pause and just notice what you're thinking. What am I thinking right now?
That's a good question.
I'm thinking, it's just kind of notice your thought. So I'm thinking, you're so defiant. Why can't you ever do what I want you to do? And just notice that and be like, okay, so that's what triggered me, was that I'm thinking you're so defiant, you don't do what I want to do. And then the next step is and you're just giving yourself grace. You're thinking, okay, so next time I ask him to get off the video game, what could I change my thought to? What can I try to think next time? And so you might think, okay, next time I'm going to think, okay, he's doing something he really enjoys right now, right? If I was sitting here reading a book and someone was like, boop, time to be done reading, I'd probably have a big reaction too. I love reading, and someone else just told me I can't do that anymore. So it's like, okay, so what could I think next time, is the step right here, changing that thought.
Okay, that's so awesome. And just kind of as a side, not a tangent, but just to explain or support you in what you just said. There's a comedian, his name is Brian Regan. Do you know who he is?
I don't.
And
I'll check him out.
He's pretty clean, so I really like him.
Okay.
But he has this joke of imitating a child who has a balloon in his hand, and the balloon flies away, and the child has a fit, starts screaming and crying, and their balloon is leaving, and the parents this is just a balloon, it's okay, we can get you another balloon.
Yeah.
But then he related that to what if the wallet in his back pocket suddenly floated up out of the air, then he'd be throwing a tantrum too.
Yes, it's the same thing.
Same thing.
Yes, I love that. That's hilarious. Yeah, I'll have to check that out, because that's perfect. It's a perfect example. Yeah, it's the same thing.
I always have to think about that. Why is my child getting so worked up over something so little? And then I thought, well, if something was important to me, like this video game, for a child who won't stop playing, then I might have a hard time, like you said, if someone just ripped the book out of my hands or my wallet started floating away, I would start throwing a tantrum too.
Yeah. Or it's because we don't know what they're maybe it's like the Super Bowl and you're really into football and there's no time on the clock and someone's going to kick a field goal and someone comes and turns the TV off. You know what I mean? It's kind of, we don't know, that's in their brains. That's what's happening. So of course they're going to respond how they're responding.
Gotcha.
And then to help fix that comes later. So the fourth step is calm. So you have to be calm. But you've already set yourself up for that if you've gone through the first 3 steps, right? Because you're only really worrying about one behavior. You've changed your thoughts about what behavior is. You've realized you've replaced your thoughts so that you aren't triggered. So you're going to be calm, really. But here's why it's important to be calm. And that's kids. And here's where we'll get into what's going on in the brain and the body a little bit, is it's called co-regulation. So your child is going to regulate off of you. If you're going further in the wrong direction, you're going to take them right with you. So here's what's going on in the body. So we'll call it the green pathway and the red pathway, and that's our nervous system. And when our bodies are on the green pathway, we are calm, we're regulated, we're focused. Like right now, you and I are green pathway people. When we're on our green pathway, our thinking brain, so that the brain that's responsible for making choices, impulse control, whatever, depending on our age, however much we actually have, emotional regulation, all of that's turned on. It's functioning. We can listen to reason. We can make a choice. We can listen to logic. Then something happens that is perceived as threatening to our nervous system. And this threat can be as simple as, I don't want to do what I was just asked to do. That feels threatening to me. So it's not these actual like threats to our life, but just something happens that our nervous system interprets as threatening. We start going down the red pathway. And this is where you start getting into fight or flight responses, because the threat is what our body is feeling. When that happens, our thinking brain shuts off and reacting brain is going a mile a minute. So they can't make choices, can't listen to reason, can't control impulses, can't control emotions. And that's with us too, right? That's when we start yelling and then feel guilty later, it's because, oh gosh, why did I do that? I know not to do that. Well, yeah, but your thinking brain was off. Like, it's not your fault. Your thinking brain was off. But it happens with kids too. And what we do so much is they're having a meltdown or an outburst, and we continue to talk to them, right? And try to make them understand, and try to reason with them, or even bribe them or threaten them, or we grasp when we start feeling out of control, right? We grasp for whatever we can. And that's just more stimulation, more. So in those moments, the best thing to do is to be calm, and be calm, not just act calm. Like, you have to actually be calm. And if you've gone through, if you're thinking about behavior differently and your thoughts are different, you can be calm. If you're in this, okay, I need to help my kid, I need to be really curious about why they can't meet this expectation, you can be calm in those moments. And really the key in those moments is just to get them back and calm down. And one of the best ways to do that is to stop talking. Because as we try to make them understand and they don't, then we start getting worked up, because why don't you just listen to me? I know how to help you. And it just all escalates from there. So just calm and being in a place to help them be calm.
Okay.
That step.
That's awesome. I love this, because I am guilty of continuing to talk when my child has totally shut off, when I'm like, you will listen to me and I will have the last word.
Yes.
Even when I'm speaking in a calm voice. But I didn't realize that, and it makes total sense that coming from a psychology background and as a nutrition coach, one way that we stop emotional eating in its tracks is to stop and take deep breaths and pay attention to actually how our body is feeling, not what our mind is thinking, like getting our mind out of our thoughts and into the present moment. So then we can go back to doing what we were doing instead of reacting to whatever stimulus was so overwhelming that we needed to respond with this, whatever we can control kind of thing.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. That's awesome.
But it just reminds me of the same thing. Like, we have these pathways where if we remain calm, then we can continue making rational decisions.
Yes.
And if we don't, then the stimulus is as much as, I mean, so many coaches and mentors that I have followed and worked with have all said our brains can't tell the difference between the threat of a lion chasing us or the threat of somebody else, like what you're talking about. You know, the fight or flight stimulus is the same on our brains. It doesn't matter. We're hardwired for that survival.
Right. And one little tidbit here too that might be helpful to mention here is so what happens is that threat comes in and then hormones start to get released, right?
Oh, yes.
And it takes 6 seconds for that to happen. So after those hormones are released, it's 6 seconds until it's over. So if you are with your child and they're in some sort of meltdown or outburst, and it's been longer than 6 seconds, you can pretty much know that they are on that red pathway. And the only goal should really be to help them, like whatever expectation you had, just table it for a minute and really get them back into that calm place. And then another mistake I feel people make is then once those hormones are released, it takes 20 to 30 minutes for them to dissipate. And so we do this all the time. We'll calm our kid down and 10 seconds later, try to revisit what made them mad and they shoot right back up. Right. So really giving them that time of like to get calm, even if they look calm, they need about 20 minutes to get really back to where they were to then go back to address, because it's not about kids just getting away with everything, but then going back to address like whatever expectation was hard to begin with.
And that's so, I think I'm hoping that this is so enlightening. It is for me, because too often we think, well, if I don't talk to them now about this and we find some sort of resolve within 5 minutes, then I've let them get away with it. And I feel guilty for being a bad parent because I haven't won the situation, basically, right?
Right.
I haven't put my foot down and they don't know that I'm parent. I'm letting them get away with it. When actually what you're telling us is not the truth.
It's not the truth. And it's just what we're taught to think. It's what, our parents thought. There's just so much more now out there and proof. I mean, it really works. And it's not, and there's ways it's not about, again, it's still not about letting kids get away with stuff. It's about, and we'll get to this with the next one. I know we're probably running out of time.
No, we're good.
Okay. But it's, meeting them where they're at. So, if a kid's sitting there hitting you or whatever, you don't just sit there and let them hit you. It's, you're mad. I know you're mad. I see that. I want to help you, but I can't let you hit me. So we're still like instilling some things, but it's a sweet spot, right? There's like super authoritative and then there's permissive parenting. So we're like, it's a sweet spot. It's a sweet spot for sure. And it's tricky to find. But
you pointed out a really good way to do that was just to say, look, you can't hit me. Hitting is never right. But so we'll talk about this when you're calm and helping them to calm down.
Helping them get calm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So step number 5.
Step number 5. Okay, this is like a huge step. So it's connection is what I call it. But this is the action step. This is where, everything up till now has been all getting your mind right to show up to act.
Here. Okay.
To act. Okay. So, but you can't, I get so much like, what do I do? What do I do? To, make my kid do this or that. And you can't skip the first steps. Otherwise, if you show up in this acting state, without those steps, you don't show up right. You don't, you kind of like, you have to have room, you have to have space for their emotional storm or their physical storm, because you have to take some of it on to be able to help. And if you show up without space for it, you can't help. So the steps leading up to this are put you in that perfect place to be like, okay, so now I need to do something and I need to help.
Okay, I love this.
Yeah. And so go ahead.
Oh, I just actually I'm going to put in a selfish plug. The like my motto, the mission statement for my business is called HealthyMe HealthyWe, and it says a healthy we begins with a healthy me. So you have to get yourself right before you can. And I love how you say that, kind of take on some of their storm. You're a superhero like this. I think of like Wonder Woman or Halle Berry. I can't remember the superhero she plays, but she creates this. I think she's called Storm, actually.
I think she is too. I think you're right.
She creates this storm, but she controls the storm just by her presence. And anyway, I imagine that this is kind of the superhero and the parent coming out after they've put themselves in that position to handle it. So that's awesome.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because another really good visual for it is like a hurricane. And there's the eye of the hurricane is completely calm, and everything else is going on around it. So at this point, you got to the point where you're sort of the eye of that hurricane. You're calm. There's this chaos going on out here, right? But you're in the center and calm. And now you can do something about it. So,
okay, you've got me singing Hamilton in my head because you said that. Yeah. Anyway, okay. So what's the action here?
So the action here, and it kind of splits, of course, because this is where I'm going to go down this first path first. Okay. So this is where you are starting to become really clear on what's causing the behavior too. So the first step is to look at the situation and adjust through connection. So all of this is through connection, but you're adjusting or looking at your expectations. So if this kid is like, again, time to get off your game. No, I hate you. It's like, okay, so the way I'm asking him to get off the video game isn't working. Right? Let's first just accept that. We're going to put it on ourselves. So I need to change something about this situation so that he can do it. So one question to ask is like, what would make this easier for him to say yes to? Okay. So in this case, it might be, and here it gets into a little trial and error, but there's sort of three prongs to this or whatever. Is there something about the environment I can change? Is there something about the actual task I can change? Or is there something about my interaction that I can change? So 3 things to look at to be able to change.
So what were those again? Environment,
task, and interaction.
Okay.
And so in this case, he's having a hard time with however you're asking him to get off. So one thing that's worked in my house for this situation is to say, I need you to find a good place to stop. So about 20 minutes before I need my kids off, I'm like, I need you to find a good place to stop.
Now, I love that you give them that large window instead of 5 minutes. Yeah.
Right. Because if I was, again, reading a book, I'd rather someone say, hey, find a good place to stop. Oh, okay, I'll finish this chapter, versus yanking it out of my hand. So then it's like, okay, so say you're going to try that. So, but they never find a good place to stop, right? Like it just goes on and on. Okay, so they need a little bit more support. So maybe you sit down with them and you're like, okay, we're going to find a good place to stop. Tell me in your game where you think a good place to stop is going to be. And then they might say, oh, after this level or whatever, I don't know. And then you sit there with them. So here you're sort of also changing the interaction. And when they get to that end of that level, you're like, oh, so remember, this was where you said was going to be a good place to stop. So you're playing with the support, and then you gradually after a while, you won't have to sit there anymore, and they'll find a good place to stop and they'll move on. So it's all about adjusting your expectation and changing it to meet them where they're at. Because there's something about that expectation that they cannot do. An analogy I like to use is like the kid at the bottom of the stairs sitting in a wheelchair, right? And we want them to come up the stairs. We don't stand at the top of the stairs and continue to say, come on, and ask the same way over and over and over and over, or think that they're lazy or, just want to get out of it, right? What do? We meet them where they're at and build them a ramp. It's just so obvious. And so that's what these kids need, is a ramp. It's like, I'm here and they're here. I need to bridge that gap so that they can do it. And then you don't leave them there. You help, then you grow from there. But then what happens, and this gets into the last step of cultivate, but through that experience of adjusting those expectations and meeting them where they're at, so now your child is able to stop playing video games without getting mad, right? And so by doing that over and over, that's what cultivates self-regulation, is being able to be, like in this case, be told you need to do something you don't really want to do, but stay on that green pathway and get through it. That's what cultivates self-regulation. And that's what makes them be able to do it by themselves. And then you've done all of this without fear, without bribing, without threatening. And so just the relationship that you're building with your child has also really grown, but then the behaviors changed at the same time. So
your behaviors have changed.
Yeah, both of you, and everybody's calmer and everybody's happier. For sure.
That's awesome. It reminds me of, and I love how you talk about bridging the gap and cultivating that. So my youngest son has been blessed with Down syndrome, and he can do so many things. Like it just takes him a little bit longer to get there. And we've been practicing walking up and down the stairs without bear crawling up the stairs. So he holds my hand. Now I can leave him at the bottom of the stairs and say, come up the stairs. But before, there was no possible way that I could say, come up the stairs. And he'd be like, how do you, how in the world do you think I'm supposed to do that? So now I hold his hand and he says, 1, 2, 1, 2. And he knows to move one step in front of the other. And it's so fun to watch him know what to do now in his head, because we've done it over and over again the same way. And that's
so great. Yeah. A way I like to put it in perspective, like for me or for an adult, and I'm just picking our language, but it'd be like if you handed me a book written in Chinese, okay, and you told me to read the book. I can't read the book. You know what I mean? And by telling me to try harder, or by telling me the same thing over and over, doesn't help me read the book, right? By giving me the worst consequence or the biggest reward, still can't read the book, right? But if you met me where I'm at and taught me to read the book, then maybe I could read the book. So that's just been, and it's the same thing, but it just doesn't look like it, right? Because our brains are where they are. So it's hard to put our heads in the heads of our little people.
Yeah. So can I ask you, does this help them to create solutions on their own eventually too?
Absolutely.
I know so many people struggle with being like, my child doesn't know how to make a decision. I have to tell him every single thing to do. But I think that's because they've been so conditioned, and I'm guilty of this myself, conditioned to wait to do something until they are told to do it, or there's a consequence, and they don't like that consequence. So then they do it. But until then, they're like, well, what should I do next?
Right. Yeah. Well, and tell me if this answers your question or not, but like with the, you definitely bring them in. So the kid who's having trouble getting off the video games, like one of the first steps would be in sort of the action is out of the moment, so we're not, is, hey, I've noticed you get really mad when I tell you it's our video game time is over. And I
Mhm.
get it. Like, I don't like stopping things I think's really fun either. So I get it. I wonder, is there a way that I can help you be happier when it's time to turn the game off? Like, is there something I could do different? Is there something, we could do? And sometimes they'll come up with something right away. And then if they don't, then you might give some examples. So you're just taking them through the thought process,
Mhm.
right? Well, gosh, I wonder if it would help to do this. What do you think? They might be like, no. Okay, well, what about this? And that can be really helpful too, is you agree on this plan. You agree on it. They've been a part of it. They've helped,
Mhm.
make choices about it. And so when the time comes, um, it's not so out of the blue. There is this sort of plan that's there for them to fall back on a little bit. And you can even remind them, like, okay, you're going to go play video games right now. What's our plan when it's time to turn them off? And then they'll say it back to you, because there's, okay, I'm excited. Let's try our plan, so yeah, so that's how we help them learn to kind of problem solve on their own. And just by helping guide them through all of this, um, just helps too, because their whole nervous system is sort of shifting as they go through it.
Okay, that's really interesting. I think that's really helpful for parents to realize their bodies have to transition from one activity to another just as much as their minds do.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
exactly. And one more thing to add, just because it's always a question, and it's sort of a piece too, back on the action part, right?
mhm.
So there's this situation that we've been talking about, but then there's also there's what about the kid who's like wants dessert before dinner, right? So and they're like screaming and crying because they can't have dessert before dinner. So, you know, that's a little different, right? Because there's not really an expectation to change. And so in that case, and is where you really do, because kids still need boundaries. Like, this isn't about like walking all over parents, but another action part, like, so there's this whole adjust the expectations, but the other part is like, um this is not really, there's no really expectation to adjust. They just want dessert, you
Yeah.
know, that is to hold your boundary with love, basically. So it's like, oh gosh, you really want dessert before dinner. Like, I totally get that. And you're allowed to be mad about that. It's okay for you to have big feelings about that, but we eat dessert after dinner, and then just kind of be there. I can help you calm down. I can help you be happier. Um, so there's also there's that approach to it for certain behaviors too.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love that. Again, my youngest son has, he's 5 and he has Down syndrome. So it's a little bit harder for him
Yeah.
for us
Yeah,
to be like,
absolutely.
it's time to have dinner and then you can have dessert. But that's like, he's like, no, I want to do this. And so we're like, okay, you can have that when you have dinner, and we'll let him do it on his own time
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
when he's decided that he's hungry. The standards haven't changed. He can't have
Right.
dessert until he's had dinner.
Right.
But as soon as he does have his dinner, which whenever that happens, then he can have his dessert.
Right.
So
Yeah.
you're right, like
Yeah.
kind of giving them that space without changing the standards,
Yeah.
and the repetition of saying, okay, this is how it is.
Yeah.
So when you've done
Yeah.
this, then you can have this. It's
Right.
that
Exactly.
reward systems. We as adults have to, okay, when I finish this project, or when I finish X, then I can have Y,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
This
Exactly.
reward system.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
So this has been so enlightening. Thank you for sharing
Love
all
it.
this.
Yes. Yes.
So
It was a lot. Kind of threw a lot, but yeah.
I know. I hope everybody took notes. I'm going to post some of them in the Facebook group. So I hope everybody watching, I hope that you enjoyed this. If you're watching the replay, please let us know with the hashtag replay so that we can comment on it after the fact. And Erin, how can people, if they want to go deeper with you
Yeah.
on this, how can they find you? I know you're in
Yeah,
our Facebook group, which is
I
super
am,
cool.
which is
But
super fun. Well, first, if you're watching this on replay, if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the comments too, and I'll watch
yes.
for those and I can answer any questions. So I'm mostly on Facebook. That's where I usually am. And I just, you just Erin Jakowski, using my personal, just my profile for that. So you can come find that. I also have a group. It's called the Behavior Breakthrough Community. So you're also, I'd love for anybody to join that group as well. So those are the two best places.
And we'll put that link below the video to
Awesome.
that Facebook group. That's fantastic. So
Yeah.
thank you for sharing all this, Erin. And I look forward to many more of these conversations. It's been
absolutely. This has been great. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing it all. And we hope that you enjoyed this. And remember, remember to give a shout out to Erin and let her know what your biggest takeaway from this was. I think that would be really helpful too.
That'd be awesome. Yeah.
But make it a great day, and we'll see you all later.